Merry equality and happy diversity to each and every one of our biased cooties. Yes! Today we're going to be focusing on SalesForce's Equality Badge. These screenshots have been taken so that we can just get to the highlights of the badge. So first up is, of course, the companies that are more gender, that's biology, diverse are 15% more likely to outperform others. Those which are ethnically, genetically diverse are 35% more likely to outperform others. Those are some pretty significant returns for your investment in genetic and biologically superior humans. Next, we're going to focus on inclusion, which delivers results that benefit the organization. Thanks to our friends in the employee resource groups, which we'll find out more about later, you are now able to take a conscious action to hire, in other words, commit discrimination, based on a visible act of our branded products that are going to be marching in military conformation to a symbol like a rainbow flag, a Nazi swastika, a Star of David. And why are people going along with this? Well, it contributes to being included. In other words, the more pressure we put on them to want to feel included, to want to be a stereotype, the more genetic and biologically superior these people will be when they fulfill their roles in society. When you look at diversity in your team, what do you see? Do you see our brandings, or perhaps an opportunity to increase the diversity? How much more you might learn, or in other words, learn more now. Get out and buy more minorities before supplies run out. This offer won't last long because we're selling people. Now, throughout this document, you're going to hear later on about humans having biases. But what about humans that wrote these reports? Do they have biases? A diverse workplace can capture greater share of the consumer market. In other words, our media promotion increases the market share. Recruiting from a diverse pool of candidates means a more qualified workplace. That's because our minorities are genetically superior. A diverse and inclusive workforce helps businesses avoid employee turnover costs. In other words, friends keep you back, and they will never leave you if their friends peer pressure in them to stay here. Diversity fosters a more creative and innovative workplace. Well, this document is proof of that alone, but we also know magic words like bias, equality. All these words allow us to have power over you. In the same way, we can all agree that Santa Claus is watching you when children are around, and so you better behave or else. Businesses need to adapt to our changing nation to be competitive in the economic market. In other words, with enough peer pressure, people will think that they need to see people that look like them with their magic symbols so that they know this is an A-OK quality stamped product. Diversity is the key aspect of entrepreneurialism. You just basically can't do anything without us. Diversity in the workplace is necessary to create competitive economy in a globalized world. This is why we don't want you to think of yourself as Americans and bring in more members to our employee resource group. This isn't about hiring people who work at the company. It's about increasing the representation that the employee resource group holds over the company, and it needs the company to do its recruiting for it. Diversity in the boardroom is needed to leverage the company's full potential. Like I said, once we have a large enough percentage of the people, we can do all sorts of things you would expect from a union or a cartel. We basically own your company. We're going to, of course, see case studies next, of gender and emerging market. Now we're on to financial performance, high returns correlated with diversity. Because women buy more from other women. 70% of the household purchases are done by women. Now, it's interesting that they're comparing women to China, because both China and women are easily exploitable, work hard, and are cheap. If that's not convincing enough, take a look at the McKinsey & Company September 2015 report, How Advancing Women Equality Can Add 12 trillion to Global Growth. Yep, that's 12 trillion with a T. Here is an exhibit from the McKinsey report that shows what happened by country if efforts were focused on helping women achieve their full economic potential. After all, women account for half the world's working age population. As a business, this is a critical market to pay attention to. Now, how much would you pay? Just get out and buy more women. The reason this is partially funny to me is I used to work in retail where women do the shopping, and they would always compliment how great it was to actually see a man among all of the women. Yes, they actually called it emerging markets. The emerging markets, large personal buying power, 509 billion to 978 billion. Disposable personal income of the LGBT community. Large amount of potential revenue added to a company's bottom line. Alright, conclusion. Leveraging diversity. Manage it well. Create a strategy. How our unconscious biases create unintentional barriers to inclusion. If you're not convinced yet, you're biased, okay? You're just a magic word. You have cooties if you're not convinced to buy our products. That's just how much in the echo chamber these people are. They actually think that telling you you're biased is going to make you want to buy something from them. All right, more case studies. To attract and retain top talent. To eliminate pay discrepancies. Fixed price basically means you won't get a better deal elsewhere. And just in case you could, we'll have your friends here to hold you back. Alright, there's that word again, that unconscious bias. I want you to think cooties whenever you hear unconscious bias, because it's basically an imaginary thought crime. And how do we handle that? Well, we do a struggle session. The best definition of a struggle session is Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson wants to help teach Bart a lesson by strangling him. That's what help teach means, to strangle you so you can't move. That's the awareness training. It's a punishment for your thought crime. Now, the next part is what a cartel does. So cartels try to prevent competition by qualifying and restricting the number of new entrants based on SalesForce's outreach recruiting efforts. That's this stuff up here, and at least one female or minority. That's this part down here, at least one female candidate or underrepresented minority. They're going to interview. Now, here's what cartels are according to Wikipedia. Cartels are usually thought of as a group of corporations, some consider trade unions. Now remember, these employee resource groups, the same ones exist in more than one company, and that seek to raise the price of labor by preventing competition. So again, that imaginary wage gap is a way to seek to raise the price of it. Intellectuals refer to it as the event, where it doesn't matter what the event is, it really matters the reaction to the event. And they got to cause a panic. We'll see that later in here. Again, the professions of the bodies controlling training, license to practice, that's the trade schools. That's these coder dojo type courses, the diversity in tech, the diversity schools. There you are, okay? There's that part of the cartel. Licenses and training practice qualify or restrict the number of new entrants into the profession, thereby creating artificially low supply. Now, what does this entire document keep telling us? That there is a low supply of women and minorities in the workplace. Now, why does this happen? Well, it happens because of groupthink. And there's a couple of quotes that I want to read you. So it happens because of groupthink. It happens at other companies like Swiss Air, where they eliminated industrial expertise, increased groupthink, lacking of expertise, similar backgrounds, norms, and values, and pressure to conform. Well, here's Mark Benioff's own words on that. And this is page 33 through 34 in Behind the Clouds. We taught everyone how to defend the message against objections to make them feel more confident. That's lacking experience or invincibility. Pitches were role-based to present different problem-solving solutions angles to CIO than a sales manager. Now it's similar norms and values, but why stop with role-based for a CIO and a sales manager when genetics and biology have been roles to make a lot of money traditionally, which is what he does. Everyone is on message with precision of a sophisticated political campaign. Now, for those of you that think I'm being negative or mean to Benioff, remember, Benioff states on page 29, the no software logo violates the #1 rule of marketing. Never promote with negativity. It alienates customers. It's not accurate. However, those arguments were overran by the most important rule of marketing, which is the necessity to differentiate your brand. So in other words, Benioff doesn't care that he's promoting negativity or insulting people. He just wants to differentiate his brand, and he's always going after niche markets, which is what he's doing here. Now, he also states on page 39 to 40, one day you compete, the next day you partner. At its best, business is a friendly competition just like a game of tennis. So all I'm doing is I'm serving the ball back at Benioff. Don't ever let your competition make you angry. Instead, recognize and understand what your competitor is doing. Well, what my competitor is doing is promoting segregation. These are the employee resource groups that are now on the community. And when you have a problem as bad as the groupthink at Salesforce is, they just go along with it. It's better to market this stuff, according to Benioff. Now, Benioff also says that he likes to play devil's advocate and argue just to argue, which is honestly the best way to defeat groupthink. So that's what we're going to do. Let's keep going. Okay, so free of discrimination. Yeah, right. So we've already talked a little bit about these employee resource groups. So let's go on to them. And it takes leadership, not just from the CEO. No, not from the CEO at all. You're manipulating him. History of employment leadership means it's been going on for a while at Salesforce and explains a lot. Diverse backgrounds and their allies. Now, this is an interesting thing because I want to take a moment to talk about why allies are not diverse or equal. When I worked in retail, I had trouble getting people to show me their ID. So instead of making them feel like they were criminals, I made them feel like they were allies. So I started telling them that they were mystery shoppers. You're now testing me so I don't commit a thought crime. Now, while that example may seem inclusive, the exclusive way was the store requiring us to ask people if they wanted their bill in Spanish, because we're not asking that question to everybody, are we? So in addition to women, we've already defined the emerging market of minorities, which is LGBT, Hispanic, African, and Asian. In order for the employee resource groups to qualify as cartels, we have to restrict the number of new entrants, such as one female candidate or emerging market minority, through outreach and training programs like Coder Dojo to create an artificially low supply. So when we look at Coder Dojo's Wikipedia page, we see there's something called Coder Dojo Girls, which has had special Coder Dojo Girls sessions and claims there's an extreme shortage of women. But how do we determine there's an extreme shortage of women? The data comes from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, who in turn gets it from the Current Population Survey. The Current Population Survey only covers about 60,000 people, which is about 2% of the population. It doesn't use Social Security numbers, it doesn't include the military, and the data is also weighted with imaginary people based on race as well as age, sex cells. So this is what's used to justify the extreme shortage of women. So let's take a look at our employee resource groups. AbilityForce and VetForce are not defined as an emerging market minority. If they become one in the future, then we have to worry about this partnering with Access Computing, as well as Salesforce training, certification, and related employment that is being done for VetForce. At this time, it doesn't fit the definition of a cartel because it is not included as the emerging market minority. Next, we'll look at women, which we've already seen the Coder Dojo has the women dojos to cover the cartel criteria for training and controlling the number of entrants. Considering that women want to stop unpaid labor, it's interesting that they recommend volunteer activities. Again, with women, we only see the word retaining showing up with women. Now, the retaining is done at a fixed price to make sure you think that we care about you. I've actually had something similar happen to myself. My first job was at a library we were supposed to get performance reviews every 6 months. We never got them until minimum wage moved above what we were being paid, at which point the $1 an hour raise seemed like a good thing until I realized I could go elsewhere and make even more money. So if you're working for a company that's pulling this crap, get out now. All right, outforce. We don't seem to be seeing any recommended training companies for it. Whole selves to work every day does concern me a little because you have to wonder what type of a struggle session they're putting these people through when they go to these groups. All right, next group of races, Bold Force. This is the black organization group. You see they recommend Black Girls Code. That's your training in Year Up. This is also where the diversity and inclusion definitions are coming from. Remember that inclusion was used to rationalize discrimination based on visual differences. We can also further prove that this is a cartel by looking at BOLD. So if we look at JP Morgan Chase's resource groups, we again see BOLD. There are also other groups for Latino, Asian Pacific, LGBT, women, vets, accessibility. So let's look at the Latino. It looks like the Manos Accelerator is some sort of a mentoring training place to fit our criteria for a cartel. We've also got volunteer efforts, so we're treating the Latinos similar to the women where we want them to work for free. All right, Pacific Force. It doesn't look like any of the nonprofits are being used for training purposes, so we are not fitting our criteria for a cartel. We are seeing the only legitimate reason to split up a group based on genetics, and that is for bone marrow drives and organ donations. You need to have a genetic match to keep the body from rejecting those organs. Pacific Force could be a good model for everyone else to look at because they also have happy hours and cultural events such as the Lunar New Year Festival, which I imagine would be once a year like St. Patrick's Day, where we mock the Irish stroll by claiming that being drunk makes us Irish. And perhaps that is the best way to overcome stereotypes and move forward, which seems to have worked because the Irish no longer run around waving their flags all day long, trying to have visual acts to show unity, and don't invade Canada anymore. Now let's move on to see some of the highlights. As a company, SalesForce rallied behind employees, public stance against the law. This is all about the Religious Freedom Act that people thought were discriminating against LGBT. However, SalesForce didn't equally protest Walmart's refusal to create cakes with the unifying Confederate flag symbol. As a bonding exercise, LGBT and Confederates and asked Walmart to bake a cake with "Love Wins" written across the Confederate flag. Does not compute. Bonus points will be given for wearing a white land dress to accuse the baker of being transphobic. Error. Internet system failure. Despite SalesForce's moral high ground stance on protecting its employees, SalesForce is still being sued for both sexism and racism by its former employees. I guess we really can't have our cake and eat it too. Okay, so let's go back to the imaginary crime. Now, intellectuals have something called the event. The event can be a Salem witch trial. It can be a bombing, any kind of a panic that people react to that gets results. So this gender pay gap initiative legislation could be the result of a panic. And we keep seeing this with the wage gap. Why is there such a panic over the wage gap? What if any data scientist would easily spot a panic by interpreting SalesForce's Einstein AI report? Paying no attention to the data scientist behind the curtain, the great and powerful AI has spoken without biases, peer review, or questions that dare challenge the assumptions. And, often the solution is worse. It's like keeping women under control of other women. The Libby Better Fair Pay Act, Restoration Act. Again, this compensation equally, paid fairly. Why work harder when everybody's going to get paid the same amount as you, Why try hard to succeed and stand out and have your own individual brand when you can instead give up and let other people tell you what to do and run your life and how much you should work? Why? Why bother? Just give in to the peer pressure to jump on the bandwagon because they won't claim to be the experts, but they just told you what to do. And if you don't do it, you have biases. One final note on branding and groupthink. In 2011, when the anti-spam movement hit fever pitch, it's like I was running around saying SalesForce is as easy as walking. However, it depends how far you want to go. Yes, you can easily walk from New York to DC just by putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there eventually. However, it minimizes risk and enhances the experience by getting a guide. In 2015, I was told SalesForce was watching me for MVP status. But was Trailhead inspired by my branded catchphrases and my animated intros